I had spent 46 years living with Audrey, and yet I wasn't ready for her to leave. Who could ever truly be prepared for the moment when your entire world comes crashing down in just a heartbeat? 3 years ago, on what seemed like just another Tuesday, the day I thought would stretch into the endless future suddenly became the day my life shifted forever. A phone call from a voice I didn't recognize brought the words I'll never forget, a head-on collision at the intersection of Maple and Oak Street. That was the day everything changed. Now, here I am, sitting in our house in Greenville, which feels far too big for just me. Audrey and I used to fill these rooms with laughter, with our routines, with the hum of life. But now, the silence stretches endlessly. I walk alone through the same squeaky hardwood floors I carefully laid myself 3 decades ago. At 78, being on your own is harder than I thought, but I get by. That's what I tell Mrs. Hanson when she comes over, offering her usual pot of stew with that well-meaning smile, asking how I'm doing. I'm managing. I say, what else can I say? Every morning starts the same. I wake up at 6 sharp, and the first thing I do is turn on the coffee maker Audrey gave me for our last anniversary. The same machine, still working as it always has. I stand there for a moment, looking out the window at the backyard where the fall maples are shedding their purple leaves. Audrey used to sit right across from me. We'd talk about the day ahead, making plans, deciding on small adventures. Now I talk to the emptiness. But sometimes, I swear, I can still feel Audrey's presence here. So familiar, like she's right. There, just out of sight. This Sunday, like every Sunday, I did what I always do. Sat in my old chair with a cup of coffee. But this time, I heard a car pull up, its engine humming in the quiet morning. When I looked out the window, I saw it. Calvin's brand new black SUV. My brother-in-law, always buying cars far beyond his means. I watched through the glass as Laurel, my daughter, fixed her hair in the rearview mirror. Calvin drummed his fingers impatiently on the steering wheel, a nervous tic I had come to recognize. Laurel had always been soft, too much like Audrey in appearance, but missing that strength of character that made Audrey so remarkable. I let out a sigh, gathering my strength. Visits from them had become predictable. They came when they needed something, or out of a sense of duty, so they could clear their conscience. Then they'd forget about me for weeks, until they needed to visit again. When I opened the door, Laurel kissed me on the cheek. "Hi, Dad," she said, her floral perfume wafting around me. Too sweet, a scent Audrey never wore. "Hey, Edwin." Calvin stretched his hand toward me, and I shook it. But I could feel the false warmth in his smile. He'd been calling me by my first name since the very first time we met, despite me never giving him permission. It's a small thing, but it spoke volumes. "Come on in," I said, stepping aside. "Do you want some coffee?" "Sure, Dad," Laurel said, walking straight into the kitchen. It was as if she knew exactly where everything was. "I made your favorite blueberry pie." The gesture was sweet, but I knew it wasn't homemade. It came from the bakery down on Pine Street. Laurel had never been able to bake, no matter how many times Audrey tried to teach her. But I didn't say anything. Some things just weren't worth arguing over. As Laurel fiddled with the coffee machine, Calvin looked around the kitchen, his eyes scanning the appliances, the furniture, the house. I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head, calculating the worth of everything in the room. My son-in-law, always working on his next big idea. He'd left his job in insurance to follow his entrepreneurial spirit, but now he was in between jobs. That's what Laurel liked to call it. It had been 3 years since he quit his stable job. "How are you doing, Edwin?" Calvin asked, sitting at the table. "Can I help with anything around here? I noticed the porch could use a coat of paint." I bit back the irritation bubbling inside me. I had built this house with my own hands from the ground up, Back when? I was young and full of energy. Sure, my knees weren't what they used to be, but I could still take care of the place. I'm doing fine on my own, thank you, I said, trying to keep my voice even as I took the coffee. Laurel handed me Dot. We sat around the table, the conversation awkward and strained. Laurel started talking about her job at the insurance company. She always spoke fast when she was nervous, jumping from one topic to the next. Right now, I could see that she was anxious. She and Calvin exchanged looks, like they were preparing for something. Finally, after a long pause, Laurel spoke. Dad, we wanted to talk to you about something important. I knew exactly where this was going. Calvin straightened up, clearing his throat. Edwin, I've come across a great opportunity. You know that building on Main Street where the bookstore used to be? It's vacant now, and the rent's reasonable. Perfect place for an organic store. An organic store? I repeated, trying not to show how doubtful I felt. That's right, Calvin said, his voice full of excitement. I've done my research. There's no good organic grocery store in Greenville. People are getting more health conscious. This is a gold mine, Edwin. I could see the same gleam in his eyes that I had seen before, back when he pitched his lunch delivery service 2 years ago, or when he planned to launch a dog-walking app a year ago. None of those ideas had lasted longer than a few months. Sounds interesting, I said, trying to sound neutral. So do you have a business plan? Of course, Calvin said, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper from his jacket. Everything's calculated. We'll recoup the initial investment in 8 months, and after that, it's all profit. I took the paper and started flipping through the figures. As an engineer, I had dealt with numbers my whole life, and something about this plan didn't add up. Where are the costs for taxes and insurance? I asked, noticing the glaring holes. And these personnel costs seem way too low, Calvin grimaced. These are just preliminary estimates. Some things still need to be finalized. How? Much do you need? I asked, cutting to the chase. $45,000 to start, Calvin replied. That includes renovations, merchandise, equipment. I leaned back in my chair. $45,000. That was no small amount. I had money saved up over the years, and my pension allowed me to live comfortably, but handing over that kind of money for another one of Calvin's schemes? It didn't sit well with me. That's a lot of money, I said, my voice a little more guarded now. Laurel looked at me, her expression soft. It's a really good idea, Dad. Calvin's thought of everything. I'll help with the accounting. We'll pay you back once the business starts making a profit. I looked at my daughter. She looked so much like Audrey, her brown hair. Eyes, but there was a difference in her face now, a softness that wasn't there before. Somewhere along the way, Laurel had lost herself, and it seemed like she had been swallowed up by Calvin's dreams and ambitions. Audrey would never have let that happen. The thought of Audrey brought a rush of memories. I remembered the silver necklace I had given her on our 20th anniversary. It had a small heart-shaped locket with tiny emeralds, the color of her eyes. Audrey had worn it every day, never taking it off unless she was showering or sleeping. I remember how she'd touch it when she was deep in thought or when she was worried. It had become a part of her, like her smile or the way she tilted her head when she laughed out after the accident. A nurse had handed me Audrey's personal belongings in a small bag. The necklace was in there, bent slightly from the impact. I kept it in a box in my bedroom, only taking it out occasionally, as if holding it would bring back a piece of her. Dad, are you listening? Laurel's voice snapped me back to the present. Sorry, I was thinking. I put the papers down, my mind still a bit foggy with memories. Laurel and Calvin were looking at me, waiting. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I knew. I had to say, I understand your enthusiasm, I began slowly, but I have my doubts. What doubts? Calvin asked, his voice edged with tension. For starters, this is the third business idea you've had in the last few years. I said, trying to keep my voice calm, but it came out harsher than I intended. The lunch delivery service lasted 4 months. The dog walking app didn't even launch. Why should I believe this will work? Calvin flushed. Those were experiments. I've learned from those mistakes. This time, I know what I'm doing. I paused before continuing. That $45,000 is a big chunk of my savings. Money I've worked for my entire life. I might need it for my medical bills someday. But Dad, Laurel said softly, we'll always take care of you. It's not a gift, it's an investment. You'll be part owner of the business. I sighed. Laurel had always been an optimist, believing the best in people, just like Audrey. But Audrey had always combined that optimism with a healthy dose of skepticism. She would never have blindly jumped into something like this. I'll think about it, I said finally, knowing full well my answer would be no. A direct refusal now would only stir up trouble. Calvin's voice grew sharper. Time's running out, Edwin. If we don't secure the rent in a week, the place is gone. You've got money just sitting there, losing value. And we're offering you a chance to invest in the family business. I said I'll think about it, I repeated firmly. And it's my money, Calvin. I earned it. I have the right to decide how I want to use it. The room fell silent. Laurel looked upset. Calvin could barely contain his frustration. Dad. Please, Laurel said quietly. This is really important to us. For Calvin, it's a chance to do something he loves. And for me, it's a way to be closer to my family, to work less at the insurance office. I looked at my daughter, trying to understand. Was this just another manipulation? Or were they planning something else? With Calvin, I could never be. Sure. Then Calvin stepped forward, his voice softened but his eyes impatient. I understand your hesitation, but this is different. I have experience now, I know suppliers, I have a clear plan. I'm not asking you to just trust me. Look at the numbers. Talk to the experts. It'll work, Edwin. It has to. I sat there listening to the landlord if you want. See for yourself that it's serious. I remained silent looking at him. I may be old, but I'm not naive. How many times have I heard similar speeches from colleagues, neighbors, acquaintances? Win-win investment, guaranteed profit. These phrases almost always turned out to be a prelude to losing money. I'll give you an answer in 3 days, I finalised. I need to think it over. Calvin clearly wanted to object, but Laurel put her hand on his shoulder. Sure, Dad. Thanks for at least considering our request. They left half an hour later, leaving the pie uneaten and the words unspoken. I stood at the window, watching Calvin gesticulate furiously as she sat behind the wheel and Laurel shake her head, arguing. Because of me, of course, because of my stubbornness. And mistrust. As their car disappears around Theckerner, I slowly climb the stairs to the bedroom and open the top drawer of the dresser. There, in a carved wooden box, lay Audrey's necklace. I pulled it out, and the silver gleamed dimly in the evening light. The heart-shaped locket seemed so fragile in my wrinkled palm. What would you do, Audrey? I asked Thesilence. You always were a better judge of character. There was no answer. Never had been in all these 3 years. But today, the silence seemed especially heavy, like it was pressing an invisible weight on my shoulders. I returned the necklace to the box and closed it 3 days. I gave myself 3 days to think about it, even though deep down I already knew the answer. The money Audrey and I had been saving all our lives wasn't going to go toward another of Calvin's ventures. But how to tell Laurel that without pushing her further away? That was the real question. The phone in my pocket vibrated, snapping me out of my reverie. It was my neighbor, Bert Fielding, inviting me to his weekly game of chess. I accepted, glad for the opportunity to distract myself. After all, I had 3 more days to find a way to say no to my son-in-law without losing my daughter. 3 days turned into a week. I never gave Calvin and Laurel a straight answer, using the excuse that I needed to think things through. Really, I was just delaying the inevitable. We all knew I'd say no, but for some reason, no one wanted to say it out loud. After that Sunday conversation, something changed. Laurel started calling every day, asking how I was feeling if I needed help around the house. On Wednesday, she came over with lunch. Tuna casserole, my favorite dish that Audrey used to make. Friday, she brought fresh scones from the bakery on Church Street. Such sudden care gave me mixed feelings. Warmth from my daughter's attention and bitterness from understanding the reasons for it. That Saturday, the two of them arrived together. Calvin was unusually friendly, even offering to trim the overgrown lilac bush along the fence. I agreed that the job was really necessary. Watching from the kitchen window as my son-in-law wielded the pruning shears, I thought about how we'd never been close. Even in the early years of his marriage to Laurel, there was an invisible wall between us. He saw me as an old-fashioned, stubborn man. I saw him as an unreliable dreamer. Maybe we were both right. Laurel bustled around the kitchen preparing dinner and talking about some office gossip. I listened, half listening, nodding at the right places. My mind was on something else, how to delicately refuse them the money and still maintain my relationship with my daughter. Dad, you're not listening to me at all. Laurel interrupted her monologue, looking at me reproachfully. Sorry, I was thinking. I smiled, guilty. Age, you know, my mind scatters. She came over and put her arm around my shoulders. I'm worried about you. You spend too much time alone. Maybe you shall think about moving in with us. We have a guest room, you know. The offer took me by surprise. Move in with them, leaving a house full of memories of Audrey, being under the same roof as Calvin. Thanks, but no. I shook my head. I'm fine here. A roof over my head is a great thing at my age. But Dad, you aren't getting any younger. What if you fall or get sick? Who's going to help? There's an emergency phone. I pointed to a small device on a lanyard I wore around my neck at Laurel's insistence. And the neighbors stopped by. Bird fielding comes by every other day for chess. Laurel wanted to object, but at that moment, Calvin returned, flushed from working outdoors. Oof, I did it. He whipped the sweat from his forehead defiantly. Edwin, that's a fine pruning shear you have. Where did you get it? Harrison's hardware store, but it's been gone for about 10 years, I said. They made good tools back then. Not like they do now, huh? Calvin grinned and winked at Laurel as if we shared a joke about old people's grouchiness. Lunch passed in a strangely strained atmosphere. We talked about the weather, the health of mutual acquaintances, then a supermarket on the outskirts of town. Everything but money and the business plan. The topic hung between us, unspoken but palpable. I could see Calvin tapping his fork impatiently on the edge of his plate when he thought I wasn't looking. After lunch, Laurel began washing dishes and I went out on the veranda. Calvin joined me. A few minutes later with 2 glasses of lemonade. Beautiful day, isn't it? He handed me a glass. I nodded, accepting the drink. Strangely, the lemonade was just the way I liked it, with mint and a little sugar. Apparently, Laurel had instructed her husband. Edwin, Calvin began after a pause, I realize you're still thinking about our proposal, and I respect your caution, but time is indeed running out. There's another potential tenant who's interested in the space. It looked at the maple trees in the garden, pretending to be thoughtful. In fact, I'd already made up my mind the day they'd first talked about money. But somehow, I couldn't bring myself to say no out loud. Calvin, I said at last, turning. To him, yeah. Laurel came out onto the porch at that moment, wiping her hands with a kitchen towel. What are you guys talking about? She asked with feigned nonchalance. I was asking your father about our case, Calvin said with a strange smile. Laurel gave me a worried look. So, I looked at their tense faces and realized I couldn't do this right. Now, I couldn't see the disappointment in my daughter's eyes. Couldn't listen to Calvin's objections. I need a little more time, I said. Until tomorrow. I promise I'll give you a final answer tomorrow. They looked at each other. Calvin looked annoyed, but Laurel put her hand on his shoulder and he held back. Okay, Dad, Laurel nodded. We understand. Tomorrow's tomorrow. They left an hour later, leaving the house in perfect order. The dishes washed, the floor swept, even the couch cushions fluffed. Such care was unfamiliar and frankly a little suspicious. I was sitting in the living room contemplating how to say no to them most gently, when I remembered that Calvin had left his scarf behind. The dark blue cashmere scarf was lying on the back of a chair. I decided to call and report it, but when I pulled out my phone, I saw the battery was dead. I had to use the landline in the kitchen. Dialing my daughter's number, I heard a dial tone, but no one answered. Strange, Laurel usually picked up. I tried calling Calvin, but he didn't answer either. Deciding that they had probably slipped somewhere along the way and couldn't hear the calls, I hung up. The day was winding down toward evening. It turned on the news, but I couldn't concentrate on the economic crisis in Europe or the weather forecast. For the next week, my thoughts kept returning to the upcoming conversation. Maybe I should have given them the money after all. Not for Calvin's sake, but for Laurel's. The sound of a car pulling up pulled me out of my thoughts. Had they come back? For the scarf? I went to the window and was surprised to see that it wasn't Calvin's SUV pulling into my yard, but an unfamiliar silver sedan. The passengers didn't get out, and a minute later, the car was gone. Weird. What seemed even stranger was that 20 minutes later, I heard the familiar engine sound of Calvin's SUV. Looking out again, I saw their car drive slowly past the house without stopping. Laurel was driving, and I couldn't see Calvin. The car disappeared around the corner. What does that mean? Why would they drive by without stopping? Were they checking to see if I was home, but why? A vague uneasiness came over me. I decided to call them again. This time, Laurel answered after the fourth ring. Dad, is something wrong? I could hear the concern in her voice. No, nothing's wrong, I answered. I just wanted to tell you that Calvin left his scarf. A scarf? She asked me again. Oh yeah, that's right. Thanks for calling. We'll pick it up tomorrow when we get there. Okay, sure. By the way, I just saw you drive by the house. Why didn't you come in? There was a pause. By the house. Laurel's voice sounded weird. No, Dad, you're imagining things. We've been home for an hour. But I definitely saw your SUV. I insisted. You were driving it. Dad, she sounded worried. You were imagining things. Calvin and I are watching a movie. We haven't been anywhere. Maybe it's the neighbors. The Robinsons have a simulacre. I knew that wasn't true. The Robinsons had a minivan, not an SUV. But why would Laurel lie about something so trivial? You're probably right, I said, deciding not to insist. I'm sorry to bother you. It's okay, Dad. I'll see you tomorrow. I love you. I love you too, I said, absently, and hung up. Something was wrong here. I was pretty sure I'd seen their car. And this sudden concern and the extra attention, I decided to check one thing. Going up to the bedroom, I opened the closet where Audrey's memorabilia was kept. Her favorite shawl, family photo albums, a jewelry box. Everything looked untouched, but something told me to check the contents of the jewelry box. Inside were earrings, a few rings, the bracelet I'd given her for our 30th wedding anniversary. But the locket necklace was missing. I went through the entire contents of the jewelry box, then checked all the dresser drawers, the bedside tables, nowhere. My heart was pounding harder and harder. I remembered seeing the necklace in the jewelry box a week ago when Laurel and Calvin had come over to discuss money for the business. Where could it have gone? Who could have taken it? The answer was obvious, but I didn't want to accept it. I didn't want to believe that my own daughter could have stolen her mother's memorabilia. Or was it Calvin? Maybe he found the necklace when they were visiting and took it without Laurel's knowledge. Sat on the edge of the bed trying to calm down and think rationally. Maybe I'd moved the necklace somewhere on Myon and forgotten about it. It happens at my age. I began a methodical search of the bedroom, then the living room, the study. 2 hours of searching yielded no results. The necklace was gone. Back in the bedroom, I opened the box again, as if hoping that the jewelry would magically appear there. Suddenly, it hit me. I should check to see if anything else was missing. I wasn't too good with jewelry, but I remembered Audrey's basic stuff. To my relief, everything else was still there. Rings, earrings, bracelets. Only the locket necklace was gone. That seemed odd. If someone wanted to steal jewelry for money, why take only one thing? After all, the gold diamond earrings I had given as a gift for my silver wedding were worth much more than a modest silver necklace. Unless the thief was after that particular piece of jewelry, but why? What was so special about it? I remembered how Audrey always wore that necklace, practically never taking it off. How she touched the locket in moments of thoughtfulness. Could she have kept some secret in it, something of value? Sitting down at my desk, I pulled out annoteped and pen. Long ago, back in engineering school, I had learned tonalized problems by writing down facts and questions. This method always helped think more clearly. I wrote down one, the necklace is missing. When exactly I sunk down, but less than a week ago it was still there. 2. Laurel and Calvin are asking for money for the business. 3. They have become unusually thoughtful. 4. They drove by the house twice today, but they deny it. Looking at these items, I realized that an unsightly picture was emerging. Had they really stolen Audrey's necklace to sell it and get money? For the business? The thought was painful but logical. But something didn't add up. If they sold the necklace, why keep asking me for money? Unless the proceeds were quite large. How much could a silver necklace with small emeralds be worth? A few thousand, no more. That's definitely not enough to open a store. The next step was obvious. Talk to Laurel and Calvin directly. But my gut told me that wasn't a good idea. If they really did steal the necklace, they deny it. And I'd lose my chance to find out the truth. No. We need a different approach. We need to do our own investigation. Westhold start by finding out if they sold the necklace to local jewelers. There were 3 jewelry stores in Greenville, Diamond Paradise on Main Street, Silver Age and the Mall, and my old friend Austin Thorndyke's shop on Oak Street. Austin was the same jeweler who made the necklace for Audrey many years ago. He would recognize it at first sight. It's settled. Tomorrow, I'll visit Austin and ask if anyone has brought him a necklace he knows. Then I'll check the rest off stores. In the meantime, I pulled out the photo album to find a picture of Audrey with the necklace. Such a photo could come in handy if I had to describe the piece to other jewelers. After half an hour of searching, I found a good picture. Our 35th wedding anniversary. Audrey and I in a restaurant, her in a dark green dress. That matched so well with the emeralds on the locket. Looking at the photo, I felt a lump come up tummy throat. Audrey looked so alive, so happy, her smile, her eyes full of love and wisdom. How could she leave me alone? How could I lose even the memory of her, the necklace she treasured so much? No, I won't let that happen. I will find the necklace no matter what it takes, even if it requires admitting the bitter truth about my own daughter. Tucking the photo into my shirt pocket, I closed the album and returned it to the shelf. Tomorrow was going to be a difficult day. I didn't know where this investigation would lead me, but I was determined to see it through. As I was getting ready for bed, I suddenly thought, what would I say to Laurel and Calvin when they came tomorrow for an answer about the money? Now that I suspected them of the theft, the conversation promised to be even more difficult. I decided to proceed as circumstances dictated. I would talk to Austin first and then decide how to deal with my daughter and son-in-law. Maybe then I'd have some proof of their involvement in the necklace's disappearance. As I fell asleep, I kept seeing Audrey touching her locket with her fingertips, a gesture I had seen 1,000 times, but perhaps never really understood. The morning was overcast, and so was my mood. I woke earlier than usual before 6 and lay staring at the ceiling for a long time. The upcoming conversation with the jeweler, my old friend Austin Thorndike, made me nervous. What would I say if it turned out that Laurel and Calvin had really sold Audrey's necklace? How would I look my own daughter in the eye? I forced myself to get up and make coffee. I didn't feel like eating breakfast, and I couldn't eat a bite. At 8 o'clock in the morning, I decided it was okay to call Austin. He was always an early bird, opening his workshop at 9 o'clock, but coming in much earlier to get ready for work. When I reached for the phone, it suddenly rang in its own. Austin's name popped up on the screen. The coincidence seemed strange, almost mystical. Austin. I picked up the phone, feeling my heart start to beat faster. Edwin. My old friend's voice sounded excited. I was just about to stop by your place before work. I have something to tell you, and I'm afraid it can't wait. What is it? I asked, though I already knew. I'd rather discuss it in person, Austin replied. I'll be at your place in 20 minutes if you don't mind. Sure, come on over. I was just on my way to your place, but that's even better. As I hung up the phone, I felt my insides tighten. Austin wouldn't call and come over without a good reason, and judging by the coincidence, I was going to ask him about the necklace, and he decided to talk to me. It was probably about him. The wait dragged on for an agonizingly long time. I brewed fresh coffee, took out the cookies. Mrs. Hanson had baked anything to keep my hands busy and take my mind off my anxious thoughts. At 9:25, the sound of an engine was heard in the driveway. Austin's old Buick, cherished by him since the 80s, was parked on the porch. I opened the door without waiting for the bell to ring. Austin Thorndike, a gaunt 72-year-old man with a neatly trimmed gray beard, was coming up the steps. The years had not changed him much. The same shrewd blue eyes, the same straight posture, only wrinkles and white hair. Edwin. Hess shook my hand firmly. I'm sorry for the early visit. What early? I get up at 6 o'clock, you know. I tried to smile. Come on in. Coffee's ready. We walked into the kitchen. Austin looked tense, but he was in no hurry to start a conversation. He accepted the cup of coffee, took a sip, complimented the taste. The usual rituals to delay the unpleasant moment. Well, spill it. I couldn't take it anymore. What happened? Austin set the cup down and looked me straight in the eye. Last night, just before closing time, Laurel and Calvin came into my workshop. I tensed, but didn't say anything. Let her talk. They brought a necklace silver with a heart-shaped locket and emeralds. Austin paused. The necklace I'd made for Audrey 20 years ago. I closed my eyes. So it was them after all. Stole my mother's memory for me. Did they want to sell it? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Yes. Austin nodded. They said they needed the money for a new business. Calvin was talking about. Some kind of organic grocery store. Laurel looked confused but determined, claimed it was your idea and that you didn't mind. I don't mind. My voice shook with indignation. They said I gave them permission to sell Audrey's necklace. Exactly. Austin shook his head. I didn't believe them, of course. I know how much you treasured that thing. So I told them I needed to think about it, to appraise it, and asked them to keep it until this morning, and they agreed. Not willingly, but they had no choice. I'm the only jeweler in town who could give a good price for such work, and they understood that. Austin sipped more coffee. But it's more than that, Edwin. There's something else. I tensed. What else could be connected to the necklace? I examined the locket carefully. It was my job, after all, to remember every detail. And I noticed that the lock was slightly warped, as if it had been opened the wrong way. Open it? He frowned. The locket opens? Austin looked at me strangely. Of course it does. It's a locket, Edwin. Didn't you know that? I shook my head, feeling stupid. All these years, I'd never even realized that the piece of jewelry I'd given. My wife had a secret mechanism. Audrey never said, I muttered. I thought it was just a heart-shaped pendant. No, it's a real locket. There should be room inside for a small photo or a lock of hair. Austin looked surprised. I'm surprised Audrey didn't show you. She had asked to make it openable herself when she ordered the design. I remembered how Audrey always touched the locket when she was thinking or worried. Now, it took on a new meaning. Perhaps she was checking to see if it was securely closed. And what's inside? I asked, feeling my throat drying up. Austin pulled a small envelope from his inside jacket pocket. Here, he held it out to me. I discovered it when I opened the locket the right way. With trembling hands, I took the envelope and looked inside. There was a tiny piece of paper folded several times. I carefully unfolded it. On the paper, Audrey's handwriting had written the address, First National Bank of Greenville, Safe Deposit Box number 327. A safety deposit box? I looked up at Austin. Audrey had rented a safety deposit box. It looked like it. Austin nodded. And apparently she hadn't told you about it. I was shocked. In 46 years of marriage, there had been no secrets between us. At least that's what I thought. What could be so important that Audrey kept it in the bank secret from? When I found the note, I knew I had to tell you, Austin continued. I decided to come in person instead of calling. You don't discuss these things over the phone. You did the right thing. I folded the note carefully and returned it to the envelope. What about the necklace? It's in my workshop. I told Laurel and Calvin they had to be here at 10:30 tonight. They didn't. Now I found the note. Austin looked at his watch. We have a little over an hour. What are we going to do? I wondered. Part of me wanted to go to the bank right away to find out what was in the box, but the other part of me wanted to deal with Laurel and Calvin now. Let's talk to them first, I decided. You want to know why they stole the necklace instead of just asking for it. Do you think you'd give it back? Austin raised an eyebrow. Of course not. I shook my head. But it's the principle of the matter. They didn't even ask. They just took someone else's. Austin nodded. Well, let's go to the workshop. Then we'll wait for them there. The drive to Austin's jewelry shop took about 15 minutes. I sat in the passenger seat off Buick, looking at the familiar streets of Greenville and trying to make sense of what had happened. My daughter and son-in-law had stolen a piece of memorabilia to sell, and the memorabilia turned out to be the key to some mystery Audrey was keeping. Austin's workshop was located on Oak Street in a smalt-wastery Victorian building. The first floor was a store with windows lined with exquisite jewelry, and the second floor was the workshop where Austin created his masterpieces. We went upstairs. The room was filled with morning light streaming in through the large windows. Austin's desk, littered with tools and magnifying glasses, occupied the center of the room. On a special tray covered with a black velvet cloth lay Audrey's necklace. I walked over and picked it up carefully. The silver gleamed dimly in the sunlight. The heart-shaped locket with the small emeralds around it seemed so familiar and yet so different now that I knew its secret. "How does it open?" I asked Austin. He came over, took the locket from my hands, and showed me the tiny protrusion on the side. "See this element? You have to press here and slide the top to the right at the same time. It's quite a complicated mechanism. Really, I made it this way at Audrey's request. She wanted the locket to be opened only by someone who knew the secret. I tried repeating its movements, and the locket did open, revealing the small empty space inside where the note had been. Why didn't she tell me?" I muttered, more to myself and to Austin. "Maybe she was going to, but she didn't save time." He answered softly. The accident had happened so suddenly. They nodded, closing the locket. It felt like the truth. Audrey was killed instantly. Her car had collided with a truck whose driver had fallen asleep at the wheel. She didn't even have time to slow down. Maybe she really planned to tell the truth, but life had a different plan. Austin and I sat in chairs in the corner off the workshop, waiting for Laurel and Calvin to arrive. Time dragged agonizingly slow. I glanced at my watch every 5 minutes, unable to concentrate on the conversation Austin was trying to keep up. At exactly 10:30, we heard the chime of a bell downstairs. Someone had entered the store. A minute later, footsteps sounded on the stairs and Laurel and Calvin came up into the shop. They stopped on the threshold when they saw me. A spectrum of emotions on their faces, from surprise to embarrassment to fear. "Dad?" Laurel looked like she'd seen a ghost. "What are you doing here?" "I think you know." I stood up, clutching the necklace in my hand. "Austin called me this morning, told me about your visit yesterday." Calvin turned pale, but quickly pulled himself together. "Edwin, it's not what you think," he began. "It isn't," I interrupted him. "What am I supposed to think?" "You stole Audrey's necklace from my house and tried to sell it. How else can that be interpreted?" "We didn't steal it," Laurel exclaimed. "We just what?" I raised my voice. "You took it without asking. That's what stealing is, Laurel." She lowered her eyes. Calvin put his hand on her shoulder as if protecting her. "Okay," he said. "We didn't do the right thing, but we had no choice. We really need money for the business, and you refused to help. So you decided to help yourselves at my expense?" I shook my head. "And you chose this very thing, the necklace I gave your mother, the one she wore without taking it off. The thing that's worth more to me than any money. Dad, we were going to return it." Laurel stepped forward, tears glistening in her eyes. "As soon as the business started turning a profit, we'd buy the necklace back. And you really believe that?" I looked at my daughter bitterly. "After all of Calvin's failed ventures, you still think this store will be a success? Don't you dare say that." Calvin flared up. "You've always underestimated, always looked down on me. This business will really take off. You'll see. I don't care if your business blows up or not," I tried to say calmly, though I was seething inside. "It's not about money. It's about trust. You came into my house, pretended to care, and you stole. From me, your family." Laurel sobbed, covering her mouth with her hand. "Dad, I'm sorry. I know it's unforgivable, but we were desperate. The bank had turned down the loan, and so had the other investors. This was our last chance." I looked at my daughter and I didn't recognize her. "Where's the principal girl Audrey and I raised?" Theon, who at 12 returned the wallet we found, refusing the reward. "Who always told the truth even when it wasn't favorable. Was this your idea or his?" I asked, nodding at Calvin. Laurel hesitated, casting a quick glance at her husband. It doesn't matter, she said. I have the same responsibility. His. Then I grinned. Bitterly. Had convinced you that it was okay to steal from your own father. Don't shift the blame, Edwin. Calvin snapped at me. Laurel is a grown woman and she makes her own decisions. And you were just standing by. I turned to my son-in-law. Didn't you insist that I give you money for the business? Didn't you talk about last chance and missed opportunities? Calvin gritted his teeth but didn't say anything. I want to know everything. I continued. When did you take the necklace? Last Saturday when you came over with the pie. Laurel nodded without looking up. Whose idea was it to sell it to Austin? Mine? Laurel answered quietly. I remembered that he'd made the necklace. I thought he'd give a good price knowing its history. His story is much deeper than you think. I walked over to the work and placed the necklace on a velvet tray. Austin, show them. Austin walked over and picked up the locket and demonstrated how it opened. Laurel and Calvin watched with growing amazement. There was a note inside, I said. The address of a safe deposit box I knew nothing about. A safe deposit box that Audrey had rented secretly from me. A safety deposit box? Calvin stepped forward, his eyes wide with interest. What's in it? I don't know, I shrugged. Haven't been to the bank yet, but I'm going to find out. And you? I looked at both of them. You have no idea what you might have done. If Austin hadn't been me friend, if he just bought the necklace and sold it on, I never would have known about Audrey's secret. Laura looked shocked. Dad, we didn't know. I swear we didn't know the locket was happening. Of course you didn't, I nodded. You were only interested in the money, not your mother's memory. Not a family heirloom, just money. There was a heavy silence in the workshop. Calvin shifted from foot to foot, clearly unsure of what to say. Laurel wept quietly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. What now? Calvin finally asked. Are you going to call the police? I gave him a long look. No, I said. I won't. I don't want my daughter's name in Thepperpers. I don't want Audrey's memory tarnished by a story like this. Calvin visibly relaxed and Laurel looked up hopefully. But that doesn't mean I forgive you, I added firmly. What you did was a betrayal, and I need time to figure out how to live with it. Dad, please. Laurel stepped toward me. We'll do anything to fix this. Anything. Right now, I'm more interested in what's in the safety deposit box. He stepped back, not letting her hug me. I need to deal with your mother's legacy, and then we'll talk. I turned to Austin. Thanks, man. I'll take the necklace. Austin nodded and held out the jewelry to me. I took it carefully and put it in the inside pocket of my jacket where the envelope with the note was. Laurel, Calvin, I looked at them. I'm going to the bank. Don't call me today. I need time to think. Without waiting for a response, I headed for the exit. Before I went down the stairs, I turned around and saw Laurel snuggled up against Calvin's shoulder, and he hugged her awkwardly, looking at me with a strange expression, a mixture of guilt, fear, and curiosity. Curiosity. It wasn't until I was outside that I realized I didn't have a car. We'd come in Austin's Buick, but now I didn't want to go back to the shop. I decided to walk to the bank. The First National Bank of Greenville was only 6 blocks away at the corner off Main Street and Park Avenue. The drive took about 20 minutes. The whole time I was thinking about what might have been stored in the mysterious box number 327. Money, documents, personal effects. What was so important that Audrey kept it a secret but left me a clue on how to find it? Before entering the bank, I stopped, took a deep breath, and clutched the locket in my pocket. The First National Bank of Greenville was the city's oldest financial institution, founded back in the late 19th century. The stately red brick building with white columns looked almost like a temple of financial stability and reliability. I walked through the heavy double doors and found myself in a spacious lobby with high ceilings. Despite the modern computers and ATMs, there was an old-world feel to the place. Marble floors, wood paneling on few walls, bronze light fixtures. I had kept money here for decades, but rarely went inside. Most transactions were done online or through an ATM. At the information desk sat a young woman with neatly styled blonde hair and a professional smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" she asked. "I need to access a safety deposit box," I answered, pulling Audrey's note from my pocket. "Number 327. The girl looked at the note and nodded. "Of course, sir. May I have your name, please?" "Edwin Quinn." She started typing something on the computer, and I tapped my fingers nervously on the counter. What if the safe deposit box is only in Audrey's name? What if I'm denied access? "Ah, here it is." The girl smiled. "Box number 327 registered to Audrey Quinn and Edwin Quinn." I exhaled with relief. So Audrey had thought of that, too, making me a co-owner. "I'm going to need your ID, Mr. Quinn, and I'm sorry to inform you that I haven't paid rent on the safe deposit box in 3 years. 3 years. That's how long it's been since Audrey died. So she paid rent regularly, but she never mentioned it. I pulled out my driver's license and handed it to the girl. "My wife died in a car accident 3 years ago. I didn't know about this cell until today." The girl's expression changed, her professional smile replaced by genuine sympathy. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Quinn. In that case, it's our policy to keep the box for 2 more years after the payments have stopped unless a family member requests it earlier. So, it's okay. The contents are still there." She checked my ID, made a copy, and handed it back. "Please sign here." She handed me a form. "I'll escort you to the vault." We took the elevator down to the basement floor. The cool air and dim lighting created a special atmosphere, as if I was descending into some secret place hidden from prying guys. In a way, it was a young woman. Her badge read Emily Prescott, account manager, led me through the massive vault door to a wall of hundreds of metal boxes of varying sizes. Box number 327. She stopped in front of one of the medium-sized drawers and inserted her key. "You need to insert your key to open the locker." I froze. "I don't have a key. I just found out about the existence of this box today." Emily frowned. "Usually keys are given out when you check out a safe deposit box. Your wife should have received 2 copies." I remembered the note in the locket. Audrey hadn't left a key, just an address. Was it all for nothing? Is there some other way to open the box? I could prove I was the rightful heir. Emily thought for a moment. In such cases, you need a death certificate, documents proving you're right, to inherit, and possibly a court order. The process could take some time. My heart dropped. Had I come so close to solving Audrey's mystery, but I wasn't able to find out what was inside. "Wait," Emily said suddenly. "Let me check the system to see if there are any special instructions for this box." She went back to the computer terminal in the corner of the vault and started looking for something. After a moment, her face brightened. "Mr. Quinn, there's a record in the system. Mrs. Quinn left special instructions in case you came in without a key. It mentioned some kind-of code or password." She frowned as she read it. It said, "Ask for the date we first met in day, month, year. Format, no separators." I felt goosebumps run down my spine. Audrey had thought of everything. She knew I'd find the note on the locket sooner or later, and she'd made sure I could access the box. May 26th, 1954th year. I said without hesitation, 260,554. Emily entered the numbers into the computer and nodded. "That's right. The system shows that we keep a spare key for just such occasions." She walked over to a small safe built into the wall, entered the code, and pulled out a small key with a tag attached to it. "Here you go." She handed me the key. "Now you can open the box." I went to box number 327 and inserted the key into the keyhole next to Emily's. I turned it and the door opened. "I'll leave you two alone," Emily said. "There's a file room at the end of the hallway. There you can study the contents in peace. When you're done, just press the call button and I'll be back." I thanked her and pulled a medium-sized metal box out of the box. It wasn't too heavy, but it wasn't light either. There was definitely something inside. The filing room was quiet and cozy, a small desk, a comfortable chair, and a desk lamp. I set the box on the desk and took a deep breath before opening the lid. Inside was a stack of documents neatly tied with ribbon, a few envelopes, and a small velvet box that looked like a jewelry case. I decided to start with the documents. When I untied the ribbon, I found bank statements, contracts, insurance policies. They all pertained to an account I hadn't realized existed, an investment account Audrey had opened in 1992, almost 30 years ago. I looked at the statements and was amazed. Audrey regularly funded the account, investing in conservative but stable assets, government bonds, low-risk mutual funds, stocks, and reliable companies. The sums were not very large, but in 30 years, with interest and competent management, they turned into a solid capital. According to the last statement dated a month before the accident, there was almost $500,000 in the account, $500,000. And Ick knew nothing about it. I was overcome with mixed feelings. On the one hand, surprise and even a slight resentment. How could Audrey hide such an important part of our financial life from me? On the other hand, I admired her foresight and financial acumen. I had always considered myself responsible for the financial well-being of our family. I worked as an electrical engineer, provided for us, and handled our major investments. Audrey worked as an elementary school teacher, earning far less than I did. And we both saw her income as supplemental, going toward recurring expenses and small pleasures. I now realized that all this time she had been leading a double financial life. Somehow managing to save money, invest it, watch the market, all in secret from me. Putting the statements aside, I picked up the top envelope. My name was written on it in Audrey's handwriting. I opened it carefully and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Dear Edwin, if you are reading this letter, it means you found my note in the locket. I've always known you to be perceptive and persistent when it comes to mysteries. You must be surprised and perhaps even upset to discover this secret account. Please don't think I didn't trust you. That's not what this is about. It all started in 1992 when Mimother died. She left me a small inheritance of $10,000. It was her savings that she'd been secretly saving all her life, even when she and my father were barely making ends meet. For a rainy day, she used to say, 'I wanted to tell you right away, but then I thought, what if I continued the tradition? Create my own secret fund that could one day help us or our children in times of need.' It was kind of like a game in the beginning. My little secret. I opened an account and started saving little by little from my paycheck, from the money I saved on shopping, from random gifts from relatives. Gradually, I became interested in investing, enrolled in financial literacy courses, and studied the market. And over time, my small fund began to grow. There were a few times when I was on the verge of telling you everything, especially when Laurel was having trouble with college or when you were offered early retirement. But each time we got by without the money and I decided to wait a little longer, let the account grow. And then I realized I had created something more than just savings. It was my legacy, my gift to our family, and I wanted to give it to you at a special moment. I planned to tell you all about it on our 50th wedding anniversary, which was only a few months away. I imagined surprising you, how we decide together what to do with the money. Maybe we could fulfill that dream of traveling to Europe you always talked about, or help Laurel with that down payment on that house she's been dreaming of. But I guess fate must have had it differently since you found this letter earlier. I may not be with you anymore if you're reading this. In that case, know this money is yours now. Use it as you see fit. My only request is that you leave some for Laurel. No matter what our daughter is, no matter what mistakes she makes, she's still our child. And I'd like a piece of my love to go to her, too. In the little velvet box, you'll find another surprise. It's the gift I prepared for you on our anniversary. It's yours now. I have loved you every day of our life together, Edwin, and I will always love you wherever I am. Yours, Audrey. P.S. This letter was written on June 20th, 2021. June 20th, 2021. 3 days before the accident. It was like she had a premonition. I put the letter aside, tears welling up in my eyes. Audrey, my pragmatic, prudent Audrey, always one step ahead, always ready for any eventuality. Wiping my eyes, I reached for the velvet box. Inside was an antique silver-cased pocket compass. I recognized it instantly. My father had owned just like it, and I had played with it often as a child. My father had lost it on a fishing trip when I was about 10, and I had grieved that loss for a long time. How did Audrey manage to find one just like it? I opened the compass and discovered an engraving on the inside of the lid to Edwin, my guiding light on my 50th anniversary. Love, Audrey. She had prepared this gift in advance months before our anniversary, which we never celebrated. The compass worked flawlessly, the arrow pointing steadily north. I closed it and carefully put it back in the box. There were still 2 envelopes left. I opened the second one. It contained the paperwork for a bank account in Laurel's name labeled Trust Fund. According to the terms, Laurel could access the money in the event of my death or when she reached 50. The account contained $100,000, a fifth of the total amount Audrey had raised. The third envelope contained instructions for managing the main investment account, contacts for the financial advisor who was helping Audrey, passwords for online access, recommendations for further investments. I sat surrounded by these papers, evidence of my wife's secret life, and felt overwhelmed with emotion, surprise, sadness, admiration, love. Audrey had taken care of everything, even a future in which she wouldn't exist. And here I thought I knew her well. 46 years off marriage had made me think there were no secrets between us. Now I realized that Audrey was much more complex and multifaceted than I had imagined. She had her own inner life, her own plans and dreams that I had no idea about. And yet in a way I recognized her in every detail of that plan. The care with which she had organized everything. The foresight with which she left. Clues and backup moves. The generosity with which handled the money. It was all the Audrey I knew and loved. I gathered all the paperwork back into the metal box, leaving only the letter, compass, and account access papers. I pressed the call button and Emily appeared a minute later. "Are you finished, Mr. Quinn?" she asked. "Yes," I nodded. "I'd like to pay for last year's rent and renew it for another year." "Of course," Emily smiled. "We can finalize it right now." We went upstairs and I completed the formalities, paid the necessary fees, and received a new lease, now in my own name. The contents of the box, except for the documents I decided to take with me, remained in the safe deposit box until I decided what to do with them. When I left the bank, I sat down on a bench in the small square across the street. I needed time to process what had happened and decide what to do next. $500,000, a life-changing sum. I could use the money as I saw fit. Audrey had made it clear that it was mine now. Except for Laurel's share, locked away in a trust fund. Laurel, thinking about my daughter, brought up mixed feelings. On the one hand, I was still angry and disappointed in her behavior. She'd stolen her mother's necklace, lied to me, succumbed to Calvin's manipulations. On the other, I knew she was desperate, and somewhere deep inside, she was still my daughter, my blood. But what to do about Calvin? This man had initially lacked my trust, and now he proved that my intuition was correct. He was willing to steal a family heirloom for his business plans that would most likely fail, just like all the previous ones. If I gave them the money for the store, they'd probably lose it within a year. Calvin had no business sense, no patience, no business acumen, and then not only would have lost the money, but also my relationship with my daughter, because I wouldn't have been able to keep from saying, "I told you so." Maybe I should have used some of Audrey's money to help Laurel in other ways, like paying for her to take financial literacy or investing classes, give her the opportunity to become independent, including from Calvin. But I wasn't ready to forgive them just yet. The wound of betrayal was too fresh. It needed time to think it over, to let my anger give way to more informed decisions. I pulled a compass from my pocket and opened it. The arrow trembled and pointed confidently north. To Edwin, my guiding light, the engraving read, "I had always thought I was the pillar of four family, the one to point the way." Now I realized we were equal partners. Audrey steered our family ship in her own way, quietly, stealthily, but Knowles's effectively. I raised my eyes to the sky, which was beginning to frown. A storm was coming. I had to decide what to do next. Do I go home and wait for Laurel and Calvin, who were sure to apologize, or should I go to them myself and tell them what was on my mind? Neither seemed right. I needed space, time alone with myself, to digest everything that had happened and make an informed decision. I decided to drive to Willow Lake, to the little cabin Audrey and I had bought years ago. It was where we used to spend weekends when we wanted to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city. I'd rarely gone there in recent years, too many memories. But now it seemed like the perfect place. Away from everyone, alone with nature and the memory of Audrey. I could sort out my feelings and decide what to do about the inheritance and the relatives who had betrayed me. I stood up, tucked the compass into my pocket, and headed for the bus stop. I wouldn't go home. Laurel and Calvin might be waiting there. Instead, I'll get to the bus station and take a cab to the lake. The cabin should be fine. I was paying the caretaker to keep it in good condition. Sitting on the bus, I stared out the window at the streets of Greenville and thought about the strange twists and turns of fate. Just yesterday, I was a lonely old man, disrespected even by my own children. Today, I found out I owned a considerable fortune that no one suspected. Money won't bring Audrey back or fix my relationship with my daughter, but it would give me freedom. Freedom of choice, freedom to act. I didn't know exactly what I would do with the money, but I knew I'd use it wisely in a way that would make Audrey proud. And Calvin wouldn't get a dime for his shady business plans. Not one dime. The bus stopped at the bus station, and I got off, clutching my bag of papers tightly in my hand. The unknown lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt in control. Whatever happened next would be decided by me, not by circumstances or my son-in-law's manipulations. I was ready for a new chapter of my life, a chapter one would begin writing on my own with a clean slate, but with Audrey's wisdom in my heart, and her support stretching through the years and even death. 3 days at the cabin at Willow Lake were spent in silence and reflection. I fished, walked along the shore, sat on the porch in the evenings watching the bay sunset, all the while thinking about Audrey, about her secret inheritance, about what to do next. My old cabin held many memories. Here in this kitchen, Audrey made her famous blueberry pie. In this chair, she sat with a book while I fiddled with the boat. On this veranda, we'd greet the dawn when we couldn't sleep because of age. The pain of her absence hadn't subsided in 3 years. It was just different, quiet, constant, like background noise. I turned off my phone as soon as I arrived, not wanting to talk to anyone. It wasn't until third day that I turned it on to check. Messages. As expected, there were 12 missed calls and a few excited messages from Laurel. "Dad, where are you? Dad, please call. We're worried. Any boys say you haven't been home in 2 days from Calvin." 2 calls and 1 message. "Edwin, we need to talk." "It's important." I ignored them all. Wasn't ready to talk. Instead, dialed the number of an old acquaintance of mine, Vernon Hayes, one of Greenville's top financial advisor SS. We agreed to meet the next day when I returned to town. On the evening of the last day at the lake, I made my final decision. I would not tell Laurel and Calvin about Audrey's money. That money deserved a better fate than to be thrown away on another dubious business project. They should be used for something worthy, something that reflected Audrey's values of kindness, generosity, and caring for others. In the morning, I packed up, locked up the cabin, and headed back to Greenville. On the way, I stopped by the cemetery where Audrey was buried. Her grave looked well maintained as always. I'd paid a gardener to keep a weekly eye on it. It put a bunch of wild flowers I picked by the lake on her headstone. "I found your secret, Audrey," I said quietly, standing by the grave. "Thank you for taking care of us even after you were gone. I promise I'll use the money wisely." With Vernon Hayes, we met at his office in downtown Greenville, a gay-haired mammy age with whom we had once played on the high school baseball team together and then occasionally crossed paths at town events. "Edwin, long time no see." He shook my hand firmly. "What can I do for you?" I told him the whole story about Audrey's secret account, about the trust fund for Laurel, about my desire to USC the money for good. Vernon listened intently without interrupting. "So, y'all want to set up some kind of charitable foundation?" he said when I was finished. "Yes, but not a regular one. I want it to be an anonymous foundation that will help the people of Greenville in difficult situations without too much bureaucracy or publicity." Vernon tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the table. "It's possible, but it would require some structure to make it legal. We could set up a trust with a board of trustees to decide how the funds are distributed. You can be on that board or remain completely anonymous, whichever you prefer." We spent several hours in his office discussing the details. In the end, we came to the decision to create the Lake Lily Fund, a name chosen after Audrey's favorite flowers. The fund would help Greenville families in difficult situations, paying medical bills, home repairs after natural disasters, education for gifted children from low-income families. All the things Audrey valued in her lifetime. We put half of the amount, $250,000, into this fund. $100,000 was already in Laurel's trust fund. I decided to keep the remaining $150,000 for myself, not out of greed, but as a safety net. My age and health could require significantness in the future, and I didn't want to be a burden to anyone. When all the papers were signed and Vernon and I shook hands, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if I had accomplished an important mission, completed the work Audrey had started years ago. "You know," said Vernon, walking me out, "Audrey was an amazing woman to create such a capital from nothing to manage it secretly all these years. Not everyone can do that." "Yes," I nodded. "She was always smarter than she looked and wiser than I was." Though I rarely admitted it, when I got home, I found Laurel waiting for me on the porch. She was sitting on the steps with her arms around her niece the way she used to do as a child when she was upset about something. When she saw me, she jumped up. "Daddy," she exclaimed, "where have you been?" We were going crazy with worry. I silently walked past her and opened the front door. "Come on in," I said. "We'll talk inside." We sat down in the living room. Laurel looked gaunt with shadows under her eyes. She fidgeted with the hem of her blouse, a gesture she'd inherited from Audrey. "Dad, Calvin and I wanted to apologize. What we did, it's unforgivable. I know how much you're hurting. Where's Calvin?" I asked, ignoring her apology. He's at the store. We signed the lease after all. Borrowed money from his parents, so we found another source of funding. No wonder Calvin didn't show up. He got what he wanted, and now he sent Laurel to smooth things over. "So, any big plans for the store?" I asked, not hiding my skepticism. "Yes, Dad." Laurel perked up, apparently taking my question as a sign of interest. "Calvin's already made arrangements with the suppliers, ordered the equipment. We open in 2 months. This could really work, you'll see." I didn't bother saying that I'd heard it more than once. Instead, I looked her straight in the eye. "Laurel, I know why you're here. You want to make amends so you can ask for money again. When this store starts to fall apart, just like all of Calvin's previous projects." Her fist flamed up. "That's not fair. I'm really worried about our relationship, and so is Calvin." "Calvin only cares about money." I shook my head. "And I guess I've convinced you of that too. Tell me honestly, whose idea is it to steal the necklace?" Laurel lowered her eyes. We both decided it was a mutual decision. Don't lie to me." My voice sounded harsher than I intended. "Don't make things worse by lying." She was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "Okay." Calvin suggested it. He said, "You never wear the jewelry anyway. It's just sitting in a jewelry box. That we could buy the necklace back when the business started to turn a profit." I knew it was wrong, but we were desperate, Dad. The bank turned down the loan. The investors didn't believe in us. "So, you decided you'd rather betray your father than disappoint your husband." Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to betray you. I just didn't see any other way." I looked at my daughter and saw a frightened woman who had lost herself in a relationship with a manipulator. Part of me wanted to hug her, tell her everything would be okay, but the other part remembered the stolen necklace, the lies, the mistrust. "Laurel," I tried to speak calmly. "Some things you can't just excuse and forget. What you did wasn't just stealing an item. You stole your mother's memory. The thing she wore every day, the thing that was my connection to her after she died. I know, Dad, and I'm terribly sorry." "Let me finish," I interrupted. "I won't file a police report on you. I won't tell everyone what you did. But I can't pretend it didn't happen either." I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the street where the evening lights were starting. "To come on, Dot, I need time, Laurel. Time to decide if I can trust you again. And frankly, I'm not sure I'll ever be able to trust Calvin again." "What do you mean?" There's anxiety in her voice. "I mean, I need space right now. Don't come here. Don't call every day. Give me time to sort out my feelings." "But Dad, you're not give up on me, are you?" Her voice shook. I turned to her. "I will never give up on you, Laurel. You're my daughter, and I will always love you. But love doesn't mean I have to approve of everything you do or tolerate those who push you to do bad things. Calvin isn't a bad person." She shook her head. "He's just ambitious. Sometimes too ambitious. Maybe I didn't argue, but his ambition shouldn't cost you your family and your self-respect." We talked some more, mostly repeating the same thing in different words. Laurel cried, apologized, promised it would never happen again. I listened, nodded. But inside I remained firm in my decision to distance myself, at least for the time being. When she finally left, I sat in silence for a long time, staring at Audrey's picture on the mantelpiece. Her smile, captured many years ago, seemed both supportive and sad at the same time. "Did I do the right thing, Audrey?" I asked the photograph. Would you approve? There was no answer, but somehow I was sure Audrey would have understood me. She had always valued honesty and principles above comfort and ostentatious well-being. I spent the next weeks working with Vernon on the details of the foundation. We created a board of trustees of 5 people, respected Greenville residents whom I trusted. I myself remained an anonymous Befficard known only to Vernon. This allowed me to participate in decisions but avoid unnecessary attention. The foundation's first project was the renovation of a playground in the neighborhood where Audrey had once taught. The playground had been neglected for years, but thanks to our funding, it was transformed into a bright, safe place to play. We didn't put up signs with the name of the foundation or the names of the donors. Just a simple bench engraved with a quote Audrey liked to repeat. Kindness is a language the deaf can hear and Feblin can see. Other projects followed. Scholarships for local college students, helping the elderly with home repairs, supporting the town library. Each time I saw the results of our work, it felt as if Audrey was there again. That her legacy was alive and well. Laurel and I were rarely in touch. Short phone conversations once a week. Sometimes she sent cards or messages. I didn't see Calvin at all. According to Laurel, their organic grocery store opened with great success. But within a month, they started having problems with their suppliers and landlord. A typical story for Calvin's businesses. One evening about 3 months after the necklace story, there was a knock on my door. Calvin stood on the doorstep, unusually serious and sober. "Edwin, we need to talk," he said without preamble. "About what?" I didn't invite him in, remaining standing in the doorway. "About the store? We're in trouble. Serious problems. If we don't find additional funding in the next 2 weeks, we're going to have to close. And you came to me after everything that's happened." At least he had the decency to look embarrassed. "Look, I know what Laurel and I did was wrong, but this is business, Edwin. This is a chance for us, for the Halla family. The store has potential. It just needs to get past the startup period." "How long?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. 40,000. Calvin looked him straight in the eye. "That'll cover the debts and give us 3 months' worth of reserves. In that time, we'll definitely be profitable." I sighed. "Calvin, the answer is no. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. I'm not giving you a dime for your business projects. But why?" His composure was beginning to fray at the seams. "You're not poor. You have savings, a pension. Laurel and I are reaching to build a future. The future isn't built on lies and theft," I replied. "And it's not built on less loans you can't pay back. You stole a thing from me that was priceless, not because of money, but because of memories. And now you're standing on my doorstep asking for money like nothing happened. Is this all a Booth necklace?" Calvin shook his head. We apologized. "Laurel has been crying for weeks. What more do you want?" "I want you to learn to live within your means," I said firmly. "I want you to stop dragging my daughter into a financial hole. I want you to grow up and take responsibility for your decisions." Calvin gritted his teeth. "So you're just going to leave us? Let the business go under and us lose everything? You created this situation, Calvin. I didn't. I warned you that this business, like the others, would probably fail. But you didn't listen. Now you have to live with the consequences of your decisions." He looked at me with undisguised anger. "You never believed in, never gave me a chance. That's not true. I gave you the most important chance of all. A chance to be part of my family, to be my daughter's husband, and look how you took it." Calvin turned and walked toward the car, muttering something under his breath. I didn't call him out or try to smooth things over. Some bridges should be burned, never to return to the old road. A week later, Laurel called to say that she and Calvin were closing up store and moving to Portland, where a distant relative of his had offered a job. I listened to the news calmly, wished them luck, but offered no help. In the back of my mind, I hoped that a new place and a new job where Calvin would be accountable to someone would help him finally grow up. Or maybe it would save Laurel's marriage, which, judging by the strain in her voice, was bursting at the seams. After they left, life took a new direction. I spent more time with friends, especially Austin and Bert. I regularly attended meetings of the Foundation's Board of Trustees, although I remained officially an anonymous benefactor. I started volunteering at the local library, helping with their writing program for children. Audrey would have loved it. Sometimes I'd pull out a silver locket necklace, open it, and stare at the empty space inside. The note that had led me to Audrey's secret was now stored in a safe deposit box along with other important documents, but I kept the locket itself at home as a reminder that even the closest people can keep secrets and that those secrets amities turn out to be priceless gifts. Laurel called once a month talking about life in Portland. Our conversations became calmer without the same tension but without the same intimacy. She never asked for money, and he never mentioned my newfound wealth. Some secrets are best kept until the right time, as Audrey had taught me. From time to time, I received letters from people the Foundation had helped anonymously through Vernon. They thanked the unknown benefactor and told me how their lives had changed thanks to his help. I kept these letters in a special box and sometimes reread them in the evening sitting in an armchair with a cup of tea. On one such evening, exactly a year after Audrey's mystery was discovered, I took out the compass she had prepared for our 50th anniversary. I opened it and looked at the arrow pointing steadily north. "You know, Audrey," I said aloud to the empty room, "I always thought I was the compass of our family, the one who pointed the way, but now I realize I was wrong. It was always you." The compass hand shook as if from an invisible magnetic field, probably just a draft. Or maybe Audrey was smiling somewhere, hearing my words. I closed the compass and placed it on the table next to Audrey's picture. Tomorrow was another day, a Foundation board meeting where we would decide which project to support next. Life went on. Not the one I had expected or planned, but perhaps exactly the one Audrey had envisioned for me. A life where I finally became the person she always saw me as: strong, independent, capable of helping others. I was alone but not lonely. The memory of Audrey lived on in every good deed done in her name. And in a way, it was the best legacy she could leave me. Not just money, but a new meaning of life.